Psychological scientists are sitting on secrets to a happy, healthier life. But truth be told, these secrets are only secrets at all, because psychological research isn't as widespread as it could be. So says Dr. Regan A. Gurung in a recent Psi Chi magazine article. Hi, you're listening to the Season 2 premiere episode of the PsychEverywhere podcast. I'm Bradley Cannon from the Psi Chi Central Office in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And today I have the privilege of interviewing Dr. Gurung himself. Dr. Gurung is the 2019-20 president of Psi Chi, the International Honor Society in Psychology. He's also a notable researcher of a broad range of topics. For example, he's investigated how people experience stress, what makes good teachers, what helps people learn better, and even automatic ways that people form perceptions of others based on their clothing. As unrelated as these topics may seem, there is one strong element connecting them, and that is Dr. Gurung's passion for applying psychology principles into the real world. You see, Dr. Gurung's mission is spreading psychological science. In fact, that's the first 3 words of the description of his Twitter profile, @Regan A. Gurung. Knowing that, it's no surprise that Dr. Gurung brought this passion for spreading psychology with him to Psi Chi during his presidential year. Dr. Gurung was a key player in selecting the name of this podcast, PsychEverywhere, and is also coordinating with us on the upcoming episodes for this new season of the show. In today's episode, get ready to find out all about the PsychEverywhere presidential theme and a sneak peek of what you can expect next on the podcast. Then, be sure to hit the subscribe button, because in the next episode, we're going to pick up the conversation where we left off. In that episode, we'll discuss how to get the most out of open educational resources, such as this podcast. Hi, Regan. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Bradley. How you doing?
Doing great. I just want to thank you for taking so much time with the show. I think it's taken a really neat direction since you became involved.
You know, it's exciting to see Psi Chi jump into this, and I think really recognizing the need for getting psychology out there. I think so often as psychologists, we know what psych's all about. We know how exciting it is, how applicable it is, and I think we forget that not everybody sees it, has recognized all that psychological science can do. So I love the podcast series. I love what you and the office have put together and to get this going, and it's wonderful to be a part of it.
Okay, well, first up, could you start off by telling us what is PsychEverywhere and why have you selected this theme for your year?
Yeah, it all really started with an anecdote that Jane Hallinan told me about, and that she's used at many conferences, where Jane talks about how she ran into her student of hers who was working at a flower shop, and the student very apologetically said, "Oh, Dr. Hallinan, loved your psych class, but I'm not using psych anymore, or I'm not using my major." And Jane talks about looking at her and going, "Really? You're not using psychology?" And apparently they had this great little conversation about how, indeed, managing a flower shop uses a lot of elements of psychology. And that anecdote has been echoed by numerous experiences that I've had, by other individuals that I know, and it really got me thinking about this fact that as a field, I don't think we do a good enough job about branding what is ours, on one hand, and two, as letting our students really sell themselves well. I mean, we do work hard at teaching psychology, but I don't think we are getting students ready enough to recognize the skills that we're giving them. And that's what this notion about, psychology is everywhere. Psychology is everywhere. And how can we really make that clearer? So I think I noticed that when I was advising students, when I was talking about careers with students, when I was providing options of what to do next or what to do, it always kept coming back to, is this psych related or not? And I found myself very often illustrating for the student how in pretty much any career choice you made or any occupation you look at, there are elements of psychology there. And it can be either straightforward and explicit, and in some cases maybe more implicit, but it's out there, it's everywhere. And I think when I feel, when I see somebody take a communications class, for example, or a business class, and I talk to them and they're telling me about these theories that I recognize as psychological theories, but those communications or business or econ profs may not have put it forward as psych theories, I go, you know what? Psych is everywhere. We need to claim our brand and make a better job of it. So that's where this whole notion of let's make it clear that psych is everywhere, it came from.
So is there, just to run the example home, is there anything you can think of that psychology can't be applied to?
There are probably some specific things where at first blush you can go, well, but, putting this gadget together isn't psychology. But then you go, usability testing involves psychology. Finding the best way to organize an assembly line takes psychology. Finding, a way to keep sure you can make that same gadget over and over again without getting bored takes up psychology. So it is difficult for me to come up with something. I know that if you really want to get picky about it, I'm sure you could think about chemical interactions or physics experiments or engineering, wiring, or programming that may seem a little bit more distant. But when you take a look at a lot of the applied areas around us, we see psychology is there as well. Here at Oregon State, where I am, our PhD program is applied psychology. We have an applied engineering program. We have, an applied health program. And I think around the countryside, we're doing a better job of looking at where psychology is. So, I have to work pretty hard to find things that people do where psychology is not involved in some way or the other.
Okay. So understanding that, let's talk about how Psi Chi fits into your mission to get Psych everywhere. What kind of things can we look forward to during the year ahead while you're president?
So I think the biggest, recognizing the fact that psychology is everywhere, I think I'm really trying to make sure we put together very clear-cut examples of how that's the case. It's very easy to say, oh, look, there's psychology in every job, or there are with different ways psychology can help you do what you do, but I don't think we've done enough work to make that clear. So one of the things that I'd like to see in the year ahead for sure is pulling together the explicit ways that psychology is everywhere for one. A large part of that is identifying very common areas that I think our members in particular can need some help with. And there are some very clear-cut areas where our student members, our faculty members, our workforce members could be using psychology. And one of my goals is to create an agenda of items, whether it's podcasts or webinars or other resources where our members can better capitalize on all that psychological science has to offer.
Okay, so I know there's also a journal special issue coming up called Psychological Science for All, and that's being done specifically to honor this initiative.
Absolutely. That's, I think the special issue of the journal is very explicitly calling for articles on research that apply psychology. How psychology applied in the workforce, how psychology applied to the legal realm, how psychology applied in the health realm. And, it's just exciting to get that great collaboration from Debbie and the journal staff to say it's very explicitly calling for articles on research that apply psychology. How psychology applied in the workforce, how psychology applied to the legal realm, how psychology applied in the health realm. And, it's just exciting to get that great collaboration from Debbie and the journal staff to say, this is something that we can highlight and really do something about. So that's one key thing to look forward to, is a special issue of the Psi Chi Research Journal on applications of psychology. I think there are on deck are conversations that I'll be having with various faculty on applying psychological principles to some of the things we do quite often. For example, close down the pike is a podcast on group work and how do you use psychological science to best set up groups, to best highlight the importance of groups. That's a conversation I'm particularly excited to have. Also coming down the pike is something I'm very excited for, is a conversation with my friend and colleague Jonathan Lowski on what does psychological science say about studying, and how do we take cognitive science into a very applied realm, the classroom and learning, and what do we tell students? What do we tell learners on how best to capitalize on learning? So two in particular that I'm looking forward to, and many more coming down after that.
There's also the Psych in the Headlines magazine column that's being headed up by Dr. Sean Charlton.
Absolutely. And Sean came up with this idea just during the summer as we talked about things, and super timing as far as the PsychEverywhere campaign goes. I think there's so much good research out there, and not all of us have enough time to actually capitalize on it and read it and be aware of it. And Sean's idea about Psych in the Headlines, I think, will be just a great resource for anybody and everybody who's interested in psychology. And I'm looking forward to seeing that up and running and getting that spread far and wide. In particular, I think teachers of psychology, faculty who go to the classroom will really benefit from the Psych in Headlines. I know I'm looking forward to it.
Cool. Then there's also a T-shirt. I've got one of them in my hand right now. Let's see if I can.
Lucky you. I was just told that they arrived in the office.
They look so good.
Yeah, let's tease all the listeners, right? But by the time this goes live, they should be able to hop onto our website and get it. And I think, really, quite honestly, when you mentioned the T-shirt, when I think about being a psychologist, I often think about my social psych training about identity and group identity. And I think there is a really strong identity amongst us psychologists. We are so proud of being psychologists and all that psychological science has to offer. And I just love the back of the T-shirt, where it makes that point really clearly, saying, actually, why don't you go ahead and read what's on the back?
So this is a Gildan Soft Style V-neck black T-shirt. The front of it has the PsychEverywhere logo, and it looks pretty cool. And then the back side says, "Enhancing our world with psychological science." I think you're going to love this. Definitely want to check it out.
Well, and I think plus the whole notion of PsychEverywhere with being the globe and enhancing the world, that connection there. I mean, just in general, from my identity perspective, when I walk around as a psychologist, I really believe that the contributions of psychological science are enhancing the world, and I think we've got to be bolder about proclaiming that, because it's the truth, and we've got to make more people aware of that. So, super excited by Psi Chi having that new T-shirt made, and looking forward to wearing it and actually holding one in my hands.
And then I guess the fourth thing that I wanted to touch on real quick is the social media. We're using the hashtag PsychEverywhere on Twitter and Instagram. And there's already a lot of stuff out there, and I know that Regan's been posting some things as well. Yeah,
and I think it's especially been nice to see the vice presidents in the different regions getting into that as well. Uh-huh. I think it's good to share that some more, and I think it's just alerting us all to the fact that we should be proud of what psychological science is doing, and don't hesitate to get it out there. So, I think Psi Chi is a really neat hub to do that, especially given how Psi Chi grabs us as members early on but we can be members throughout our lifetimes, no matter what we end up doing with our psychological interests, in various aspects of the workforce, whether it's the academic workforce or the more general workforce out there. I think, using psychology is key. I mean, to this day, one of my favorite experiences is when I run into a student, a past student who took Gen Psych perhaps 10, 20, 25 years ago, because I'm that old, and have that student actually talk about how what they learned in intro psych is put to use in their lives. And that is truly enhancing the world with psychological science.
All right, yeah. So if someone out there who's listening sees PsychEverywhere, be sure to share it on social media and use the hashtag. We want to definitely keep that movement continuing. So on to the sort of main event, I think. Like I mentioned earlier, Regan's been working closely with me to develop the upcoming episodes for this season of the show. Regan, would you like to do the honors and share what a few of those episodes will be about?
Absolutely. So I think as Bradley and I were talking, we realized that it would be great to think about what do psych educators, psych fans in general, what could they use a lot of? And we have a really interesting lineup planned where we are tackling and addressing some of the big questions that often get asked, and also making sure we can provide information that many faculty can use in response to what they get asked pretty frequently. So, for example, one of the ones that comes to mind is careers, and talking about, what do you do with a career in psychology? Why should you major in psychology? Some of those basic questions. And I think it's great to know that Stacy Spencer, who's done a lot of work on answering those questions, and Jane Hallinan, who's well known to many of us psych teachers, both of them have agreed to share their insights in response to careers and why psychology. Both of them have done a lot of work on this and getting their thoughts in a podcast format. The next best thing, if you can't have them fly over and talk to your students or share it with your students, well, you now have the PsychEverywhere podcast on careers and psychology to share.
Real quick, I'd like to cut in and actually share a short little excerpt from Dr. Hallinan's upcoming episode. Here it is.
Now, at some point, you may believe you want to go to graduate school, and that's perfectly fine. But I think it's an honorable thing to become someone who gets into a psychology-related position where you can use the skills that psychologists have to solve problems, to predict behavior, to anticipate difficulties, prevent problems, if you will, to work with a diverse type of people, and to be able to manage projects so that you get things done on time and keep your word. All of those are skills that I think make the psychology degree a particularly valuable passport to get into the workforce.
I've also got a clip from Dr. Spencer's episode.
If psychology majors are supposed to be psychologists, are sociology majors expected to be sociologists? Are all history majors expected to be historians? Are all philosophy majors expected to be philosophers? Are all English majors expected to be Englishists? Englishans? Englishers? The point is that view of majors becoming careers is overly simplistic and really, honestly, unrealistic. A bachelor's degree, regardless of major, should prepare people for careers, but most undergraduate majors are designed to provide students with the transferable knowledge and skills to be successful in a variety of careers, not just one. Employers value the knowledge and skills developed through the psychology major.
So, that line of addressing basically questions that we get quite often is something I'm particularly intrigued by and excited for. So we have the careers, something that we get asked a lot. We will be addressing those those key questions about grad school, why grad school, how to get into grad school. A couple of podcasts there on addressing that key question.
And here's a short clip from an upcoming episode about graduate school, which was recorded by Dr. Betsy Morgan.
In my opinion, the single most important thing to find out before you consider applying is whether or not you need an advanced degree to do the type of work you want to do. Now, you can find this out in many ways. The most important is to research the career in which you're interested. But it's also true that working in a field for a while gives you a sense of the types of degrees that the people have around you who are doing the kind of work that you want to do.
We are also looking forward to getting some podcasts on addressing big level questions such as how do you get the most out of college? We are pinpointing some challenging courses such as research methods, and we'll be talking about how do you get the most out of a research methods class, for example. I think, in addition, something that I'm particularly pleased by is Psi Chi's focus on moving and considering the needs of members in general. I think, like I already said, Psi Chi with lifetime membership, great resources that have been built for students who are in college and just after college. But I think one area where we could definitely build is what about our members in the workforce? What about our members who are past college? And I think that's a particular area where developing some content is going to be key. I know one of the things that I'm looking forward to trying to put together is, especially for our members who are in academia, talking about how do you keep yourself vibrant? How do you keep yourself excited? How do you make the most of your time in academia? Whether you're an assistant professor or a full professor, there are challenges. And I think getting folks who have navigated those challenges well would be nice to hear from. So just a lot of really good stuff coming down the pike.
Okay. So is there anything else that you'd like to add about PsychEverywhere or the podcast? Anything I missed?
I think that many of us recognize the importance of psychological science. Many of us who teach a lot in particular do our best to help apply what is taught in the classroom to lives. And I am betting there are listeners out there who have come up with some really inventive ways to highlight the fact that psych is everywhere. I bet there are some really great assignments and exercises that people have to help students apply psychology to their lives. And I, for one, would love to hear about some of those. And I invite anybody listening who has a great way of illustrating the fact that psych is everywhere to get in touch and email me, tweet at me, and let's share your great ideas with everybody else out there who cares about this and is trying to do the same.
I want to thank Regan and our listeners for joining me for the first episode of the new season of the PsychEverywhere podcast. If you liked what you heard, again, hit that subscribe button on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you're listening from. Oh, and also please do us a favor. Leave a review at Apple Podcast. Short or long, it could be a paragraph or it could be a single word. Either way, reviews help us get the podcast in front of more people. Okay, that's all for now. As you heard, we've got a lot of exciting content coming your way, including some more conversation with Regan next week about how to get the best use out of open educational resources like this podcast. Talk to you again soon. Copyright 2020. Psi Chi, the International Honor Society in Psychology. All rights reserved.